Hey guys, Josh here, and not too long ago I made a video about 10 of my favorite improvements from Story of Seasons A Wonderful Life over the original game Harvest Moon A Wonderful Life. And even though I love this remake, I think it's great, it's also not perfect. So today I would like to discuss a few things that I would consider to be downgrades from the original game. Just keep in mind, everything I say in this video is just my opinion, and what I consider a downgrade might be an upgrade for you or something. So feel free to let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything that I say, and let's start. And the biggest difference with the remake is obviously the graphics and the change in art style. I think everybody will have a different opinion on this, but the first game was a lot darker and realistic, whereas the remake is very cute and colorful. Honestly, I love both styles and I'm pretty happy with how the new game looks. I think it's beautiful. But one thing that annoys me a bit is the inconsistency with some of the assets and more specifically the animals. For example, the cows have this very realistic style similar to the cows from the original A Wonderful Life, as opposed to the round cows from other games in the series, so that's all good. However, for the sheep, who also looked realistic in the original game, they're now round, pink, and fluffy. I'm not too sure why, and the chickens, the ducks are also super round and cute. Don't get me wrong, they're all adorable, but it looks like the cows and all of the other animals were designed by two different teams who didn't consult each other about the art direction. They ended up with two different styles and did nothing about it. I just wish they went all in with either the realistic style for all of the animals or the cute style with all of the animals, instead of the somewhat strange combination that they ended up with. Also, the horse just doesn't look as good as in the original. The good thing though is that we can now choose between 3 color options, but there's just something about the horse that makes it look lifeless compared to the original. My second issue with this game that I would consider to be a downgrade from the original is how animals can no longer get sick or pass away. They have been doing it this way for a while with the Story of Seasons series, so it's not really a surprise. However, one thing that makes A Wonderful Life so special and different from the other games is that human characters do get older and some will even pass away, which really emphasizes how life isn't forever and how you should enjoy your short time you have on this planet with your friends and family. With this remake, I feel like this message is a bit watered down, as animals are immortal. No matter whether you care for them or not, you can stop feeding them or you can just leave them outside in the rain for days and weeks, and they might start liking you a little bit less, but they are going to be just fine. In the original game, if an animal was sick for a few days and you didn't heal them, you would eventually get a terribly heartbreaking cutscene where they would pass away. So ideally, you would want to prevent that from happening, and you would have to take really good care of your animals. I also really liked that since in this game it does take 1 day to order items, in the original there was a bit of planning involved where you had to make sure you always had enough things like the chicken food or animal medicine, so you didn't run out and get into trouble. Now there's not much consequence for your actions, and I can see how for some people this could be a positive, as it makes the game maybe more relaxing or stress-free. But for me, it makes the animals feel a bit lifeless and removes any kind of challenge. The third thing I consider to be a downgrade will probably also be somewhat controversial, as I think many people will see this as an improvement. But in the original game, a cow needed to give birth before she could provide milk for a year, and then she would stop producing milk until she got pregnant again. This was pretty realistic and also a good incentive to breed your animals. In the remake, after giving birth, a cow will produce a little bit more milk for a short period, but otherwise, she will still produce milk forever without the need to ever get pregnant or give birth. Also, since a cow is not able to produce milk for most of her pregnancy, this kind of negates the temporary extra milk produced after birth. So it feels like there's really no point in breeding your cows and all of your other animals. And whether you buy an animal from the shop or they're born on your farm, they will always start at 5 hearts. So yeah, there's really no benefit of getting your animals pregnant. It might be a bit cheaper, but in the end, it's just not worth it. The good thing, however, that came out of all of these changes is that you can now breed the goats, and goats will not stop giving milk, whereas in the original game, the only goat you had became completely useless after it stopped giving milk, and there was no way to get goat milk ever again. So that's no longer a problem in the remake, but overall, I feel like breeding animals just isn't really that useful anymore. And I wish there was a bit more of an incentive to do it, especially as it was a pretty important feature of the original game. Alright, now enough talking about the animals, but we're still on the topic of milk. My next complaint is about how they removed the milk drinking minigame. There used to be this minigame that you could play at the end, and the goal was to mash the A button to drink more jugs of milk than your opponent, and they replaced it with this minigame in which you have to cook food by pressing a combination of different buttons in the correct order. And maybe it makes sense that they changed it to avoid players from damaging their controller or damaging their fingers, but the minigame itself is just not as interesting due to the lack of competition. The drinking game was really exciting because you could see how fast your opponent was drinking and you had to try to beat him and drink faster, which made it really challenging, and it felt rewarding if you won. In the new minigame, however, you're just by yourself and there's no set amount of plates that you need to serve or anyone that you're competing with, so you just don't get the same rush of adrenaline or the motivation to try to be as fast as possible. It's still fun, but just not as much. And also the conditions to trigger the minigame are a lot more strict. You have to be at the right place, at the end at the right time, it has to be rainy, and conditions overall are just pretty strict, and it took me over more than 3 years before I could play it for the first time. And last, this one is maybe more of a missed opportunity than a downgrade, but going up the hill does nothing more than skip the time by 6 hours and sometimes slightly change things like your hunger or your stamina. In the original GameCube games, you could connect to Friends of Mineral Town on the Game Boy Advance, and that would let you unlock new music records, as well as recipes in both games. On one hand, everything can now be unlocked without needing a second game, so that's an improvement, and most of the records are now obtained by befriending villagers like it was in the special edition, so that's amazing. However, I feel like they could have done a little bit more. They maybe could have added an option to unlock special outfits if you had a save file from Friends of Mineral Town or Pioneers of Olive Town on your Switch, or maybe just some kind of area with a few characters, or even just some items to forage. I really feel like it was the perfect opportunity to add just a little new thing to this remake, and they didn't do much with it, so that's just a little bit disappointing. So these are the 5 things I was disappointed with while playing Story of Seasons A Wonderful Life, and while they were disappointing, they're also not deal breakers or anything like that, and in the end, I really do love this game a lot. Check out my video on the 10 improvements from the original if you haven't already. Don't think I hate this game or anything like that. So just let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my list. Subscribe if you'd like to see more Story of Seasons content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.